Hey guys, we're going to be factoring quadratic expressions, but they're going to be a mix of different problems, so we have to determine which process we have to do. So we always need to check the expression for the GCF, the greatest common factor. That's always going to be your first step. After you check for the GCF, then you go into all the other methods. So then after you check for the greatest common factor, if there's 4 terms, you are going to factor by grouping. And then if there's 3 terms, then we're going to do one of these 2 methods. So if the a is 1, so the very first term with x squared, or the variable squared, if that a, the coefficient out in front is 1, we're going to factor by finding the factors of c that add or subtract to give us our b, our middle term. Then, if the a is not 1, we have to multiply a times c and find those factors. So we're finding the factors of a, c that add or subtract to give us our b. The only thing different between this is we have to multiply our first and last term to find what add or subtract to give us b, and then we have to factor by grouping. So today's lesson is just a little bit different than what we've been doing. This assignment, this worksheet that I'm looking at right now that you see on your screen, is your assignment. So there are 20 questions, but we aren't doing 20 questions. We're going to look at 5 different problems that we'll do together, and then the rest of the problems you will do and submit in on step 2. So the first problem we're going to look at is number 2. So the first step, we have to look at the greatest common factor. Do we have a number or a variable that we can take out of every single term? We don't. We only have 3 terms, so we're going to factor by finding factors of 14 that are going to add or subtract to give us our middle term. So our factors of 14 is 1 and 14, and 2 and 7. Which combination here, if we add and subtract them, we're going to get our negative 5? It's going to be 2 and 7. We're going to have a positive 2 and subtract 7 from it to get negative 5, and then positive 2 times negative 7 gives us our negative 14 that we need. So we're just going to write it as our 2 factors, p plus 2 times p minus 7. And then that is factored. Again, it does not matter which binomial, which parenthesis you put first. You could have the p minus 7 first and then the p plus 2. Order does not matter for multiplication. So that was number 2. Let's look at number 6 now. So we have 2 terms here. Let's look at this. Do we have a greatest common factor? Do we have a number that we can take out of both? We have 7 and 9. We can't take the same number out of both of those. What about our k's? We have k squared and k. We can factor out a k. The greatest common factor is k, but we still have to factor it. So if we take out a k, we're left with 7k for the first term plus 9. Now we have to reevaluate this. Can we do anything within this parenthesis now? 7k plus 9? We cannot, so this is our factored form. The only thing we had to do was factor out the k. Okay, that was number 6. Let's look at, let's see, the next page. So, number 12. Okay, so for number 12, let's start. Very first thing, greatest common factor. Do we have a number that we can take out of all three terms, 7, 32, and 60. The only number that goes in 7 is 1 7. 7 does not go into both 32 and 60. So that does not work. So we have to factor. So we have a 7 out here, so we have to take 7 times 60. We have to multiply these two. And when we multiply those two, we get 420. So we have to find factors of 420. Now this is going to be fun. So start off 1 and 420. Then 2 and 210. 3 and 140. 4 and 105. Let's see, 5 goes into it 84 times. 6 and 70. Then we have 10 and 42. It's going to go off to the side over here. And then 12 and 35. 14 and 30. 15 and 28. And then our last factor, 20 times 21. Okay, now we have to figure out what of these factors that if we add or subtract them, it's going to give us our middle term of negative 32. I'll give you a second to figure that out. So I hope you picked 10 and 42. Still getting used to my pen over here. Okay, 10 and 42. So to get negative 32, we'd have to have a positive 10 and a negative 42. If you multiply these two together, we would get a negative 420, which we needed. So now we substitute in these middle terms for our middle term here. So we have 7x squared plus 10x minus 42x minus 60. Again, we just took this middle term and broke it into two separate terms, two separate factors of that. And now we are going to factor by grouping since we have 4 terms. So if we just split it right down the center, find the greatest common factor of these two terms. 7 and 10 does not have a factor that we can pull out, but x squared and x we do. We can take out an x. We take out one x, we're left with 7x. Oh, 7. Oh no, I was right. We're left with 7x. And then if we take out an x, we're left with plus 10. Now, we need to find the greatest common factor here between negative 42x minus 60. What's the largest number we can take out of both of these two terms? We can take out of negative 6. We factor out negative 6, get 7x plus 10. Do our two parentheses match up? And if they do, then we factored right. So we write the numbers on the outside. So x minus 6. And then we rewrite one of our parentheses, 7x plus 10. And then that is our factored form for number 12. Okay, let's go down to the bottom of the page and let's look at number 17. 17, we have 4 terms. So our gut tells us we have to factor by grouping. But the very first thing we have to do for every problem is to see if we have a greatest common factor. So let's look at our numbers. We have 125, 30, 50, and 75. What number goes into all 4 of those numbers evenly? And we want the largest number. That number would be 5. So we're going to factor out a 5. What about our variables? What variable do we have in all 4? We have an m here, an m, an m, and an m. We have an n. We don't have any n's over here. So we can only take out one of our m's. So our greatest common factor is 5m. We factor that out. And what are we left with? Left with 25 mn minus 6p minus 10m plus 15pn. Now, we're going to ignore greatest common factor for right now and just focus on the inside of this parenthesis. This inside this parenthesis is now the simplest form to work with. We have 4 terms, so we're going to factor by grouping. So, we need to split it in half. That's our normal way of doing it, splitting it right down the center. But let's look at our variables. Since we have multiple different variables, it gets a little tricky. So we have mn and a p. We don't have anything common between those variables here. And then we have mpn. Again, we don't have anything common with those variables. But what if we just switch these 2 terms? And we write 25 mn minus 10m minus 6p plus 15pn. Now, do we have common variables with our first 2 terms? We do. We have n's in common. And then over here, do we have variables in common with these 2 terms? We do. We both have p's. So this is going to factor nicely for us. So now we're just going to split it right down the middle. So what is the greatest common factor between 25mn minus 10m? That's going to be 5m. We factor that out, we're left with 5n minus 2. Now, what's the greatest common factor here? We have minus 3p. We take out negative 3p, and that leaves us with positive 2 minus 5n. Do our parentheses match up? It is reversed, but that's no big deal. We have a negative 2, but we have a positive 2 here. That's a problem. We have a positive 5n and a negative 5n. That's a problem. So could we just, instead of taking out a negative 3p, take out a positive 3p? Then that would change that to a negative 2 and a positive 5. Now do our parentheses match up? They do. So we write what's on the outside, 5m plus 3p and then rewrite one of the parentheses. I'm going to write the first one because it has the variable first and it looks a little nicer. But either one works because they are the same thing, just reversed order. And now we factored it. The last problem we're going to look at today is number 18. We have 4 terms. So again, 4 terms we're going to factor by grouping. But before we can factor by grouping, we need to see, do we have a greatest common factor that we can factor out? What goes into all 3? A 3 does. And then we have an x, an x, an x, but no x here, so we cannot take out an x. We have a y, and we don't have y's in our middle, so we can't take out a y. We take out a 3, we get 5xy minus 4bx minus 4x squared plus 5vy. Now ignore this. Oops. Forgot. Back on number 17. We factored out this greatest common factor. We have to bring him down at the very end. So it'd be 5m. We cannot forget that. That's what makes this problem the way it is. So 5m has to be with your solution of the factored by grouping section. If you do not have that with it, then it would not be the correct solution. So you can't do what I did and forget it. So back on number 18. So now we need a factor. Let's look at our variables. We have x, y, v, x. We could take out x's. And then we have x squared, vy. We can't take out anything here. So then that's going to tell us we should probably flip our middle 2 terms to see if that helps us. So we're going to rewrite everything else the same. We're flipping. We're just switching them, not flipping. So minus 4x squared minus 4vx plus 5vy. Now we can factor by grouping. So split it right down the center. Greatest common factor here. The only thing we can take out of here is an x. So we're going to take out an x. What are we left with? 5y minus 4x. Now, what can we take out of here? We have v's in common. So, let's just take out a v. So we're left with minus 4x plus 5y. Now, are our parentheses the same? We have a positive 5y, we have a positive 5y. We have a negative 4x, we have a negative 4x. The parentheses are the same. So we rewrite the outside, x plus v. And then we rewrite one of the parentheses, 5y minus 4x. And then we are not done here. We have to bring it down our greatest common factor at the end. So 3 times. And there you go. Those are all the problems that we're going to be doing together today. The other problems that we did not do, that would be your assignment for you to go on and turn in to me for step 2 of today's assignment. Please let me know if you have any questions. and I hope you guys have a great day.